Good evening, I am Nirmal and today we discuss about understanding the different types of supply chain risk. So there have been many different definition of supply chain risk, but it can be broadly defined as the variation in the distribution of possible supply chain outcomes, their likelihood and their subjective values. However, this definition has since been expanded upon to account for all the different departments and functions that operate within a supply chain. This leads to an overall definition of supply chain risks as any risks for the informations, material and product flows from original suppliers to the delivery of the final product for the end users. Simply out, supply chain risk refers to the probability of a risk event occurring the supply line and when the product goes on sales. Furthermore, risk sources are the predominant causes of the risk events. So, which are the environmental, organizational, or supply chain variable which cannot be predicted with certainty and which impact on the supply chain outcome variables. Now we discuss about the identifying supply chain risk. So there are a variety of different and approaches that a company can take in order to identify risks in their supply chain. A conceptual framework is developed for identifying the potential risks in an organizational supply chain. This process was comprised of three key steps. Number one, the probability of a risk events occurring in an organization's supply chain must be determined. Number two, next, the organization should attempt to estimate the likely duration the risk event will last for, including when it may occur. This can usually be achieved through the analysis of past experiences. And number three, lastly, an analysis should be conducted on the probable impact the risk event could have a certain facet of the organization, such as market or financial performance. So, if a company goes through these stages every time they believe a risk event may be imminent, then it will allow them to successfully identify the severity of the risk event and put in motion and plans to prevent the risk factors in an organization. So furthermore, an organization should constantly be monitoring and attempting to identify risk events. As the earlier a risk is identified, the more likely it will be that an organizations that limit or completely negate the effects. If a company is conducting a new project to improve the supply chain, then risk identification should occur during the planning and preparation stages. This means that the organizations will have to identify risk indices. So, indices which aim to give a quantitative analysis of the potential risks associated with a project. Now we discuss about supply chain risk types. After the risk has been successfully identified, it can be categorized into a variety of different supply chain risk categories. These articles will aim to identify three supply chain risk categories and suggest ways in which risks can be mitigated. So, or managed within these categories. The three supply chain risk categories that will be explored are exogenous data integrity and internal resources risk. So, exogenous or external threat of an organization. The supply chain must deal with external forces such as natural disaster, examples flooding, hurricanes or earthquakes. the natural calamities, or human centered issues, fraud or terrorism. So exogenous risk is classified into two main sections. The first is long term uncertainties, which uh, which can be in the form of seasonal demand variations or raw materials unit prices fluctuations. On the other hand, risks could cause short term uncertainties, such as cancelled, rushed orders, or equipment failure of an organization. So, there are plethora of issues present which trying to manage exogenous risk. This is mainly in the form of companies' unwillingness to plan for a large scale disruptions. Although organizations generally aim to protect themselves from small recurrent exogenous risks, they ignore the high impact, low probability ones. One of the most prominent strategies for mitigating the impact of exogenous risks events so is through the use of hedging. Hedging is a supply side risk management strategy. In a global supply chain context, hedging is undertaken by having a globally dispersed portfolio of suppliers and facilities such that a single event. This is a particularly strong strategy at mitigating exogenous risk, especially high impact ones, because it reduces the amount of operations that a potential natural disasters will hit. Furthermore, there are a variety of ways in which an organization can hedge against exogenous risks. So, one of the most prominent ways is through a product by ways through a use of dual sourcing, which protects the quality price and performance of products by sourcing from more than one supplier. So furthermore, these suppliers must be far enough apart to ensure that a natural disasters wouldn't affect both of them. Although a strong strategy, it is incredibly expensive for more a company to do, as dual sourcing is much more costly than single sourcing. So hedging is the best technique to use if a company has the available investment sources, faces high levels of exogenous risks, and produces goods where strong quality and processes control are in place. So furthermore, an organizations can use the supply chain operations reference, that is SCOR framework. These models comprised of four factor sources: make, deliver, and plan. The SCOR framework can be used to improve alignment between marketplace and the strategic response of a supply chain, on the premises that the better the alignment, the better the bottom line performance, although it doesn't identify risk. This acts as a model to increase the performance of the supply chain and make it more resilient against potential risk events. A resilient supply chain has the ability to return to its original or desired status after being disturbed by a risk events. So it also allows firms to conduct through fact-based analysis of their supply chain, thus providing them with informed knowledge to make strategic decisions involving the supply chain. Now discuss about the data integrity, information security threats. Data and information security risks can largely be managed by the organizations by implemented through security checks throughout their data management software. However, in 2001, so it had suffered data loss of failure from interviewing over 250 chief information officers, over 70% of them seated. So now we discuss about Virus detections. All companies should have virus detections software to stop incoming threats from affecting critical IT systems. So, furthermore, if this is coupled with a strong firewall, it can block the majority of malicious threats. So, uh, firewall a firewall is fundamental to a network security. Although many companies install a solid firewall on their network systems, they forget that it need to be managed. This is because the firewall must be updated with security policies and log files regularly scanned for potential threats. The majority of large companies will have various backup systems in place to maintain the integrity of data even if a threat occurs. Furthermore, these backups should usually be stored off-site to increase protections. On the other hand, many smaller companies did not recognize the value that backups provide. Users account passwords. Although users account and passwords are prominent across the majority of organizations, they must also be constantly managed. This means update employees access rights and deleted ex-employees from the system. Although this system seems like common knowledge for an organization to install and implement, it is the careful monitoring and management of the system that is imperative. So, letting a security system become updated will render it useless, as modern threats will be able to affect critical IT systems. Although risk sources related to data integrity cannot be mitigated entirely, they can be successfully managed through implementations of numerous security checks. So, this is for the end of this video, my friends. If you like my videos, please share, like, and subscribe my MBA channel. Thanks a lot for watching my videos.